So when I was a kid on the playground, I used to love the swings. Because you see, I really wanted to fly, as high as these guys were. But I actually wanted to go farther. I wanted to lean back and push my feet up until they hit the clouds and just kept going. Because for me, it was when that blue sky faded to black and I could swim among the stars, that's where my dreams were. And what's really exciting for me today is that's becoming more possible than ever before. Where there was always one road to the stars, there's now many. You see, if we think back to the 1950s, to the space race between the Soviet Union and the US, what we were doing is we were looking for men, always men, that had the right stuff. And that right stuff was physical perfection. We were selecting them for survival. Because when you went out against a frontier that we simply didn't understand, you had to have nerves of steel. Even when we got to the 1990s and the Chinese were bringing a space program online, they had the same mentality. Their taikonauts had to have a history free of broken bones, free of cavities, and free of thick calluses on the soles of their feet. Because at the end of the day, they were selecting people to wear their flag on their sleeve and to represent their nation. Well, once we got over the idea that this was simply an environment to be survived, we started to select our astronauts for performance. And for us, in most of these countries around the world, that meant scientists and engineers, the best and the brightest. Because what we were going to go do up in space was understand the very fabric of the cosmos, to understand the role of gravity and physics and biology. And that took a lot of brain power. But you see, in both of those cases, we were still selecting for the right stuff. And that right stuff meant very, very few people could go. What's happening now in this third age of spaceflight is that the frontier is opening. And when it opens from being just the right stuff, we get to see suddenly all that other stuff that makes us so profoundly human. It's not just the scientists and the engineers, but the artists, the poets, the dancers, the dreamers. And what I think is really interesting is the possibility that that enables. Because in the whole history of spaceflight, there's only been 551 astronauts, taikonauts, and cosmonauts that have ever slipped the surly bonds and gone beyond our atmosphere. That's not very many. Today, there's over 1,000 people that are holding tickets, waiting to go. There are a dozen companies worldwide that are making spaceships for the rest of us. But still, it begs the question, is this just a playground for the wealthy? I think if I take the historic view, I look at aviation, and I say when the Wright brothers flew in 1903, that 90-second flight at Kitty Hawk, they had spent their life's work and their life savings. It wasn't until we got to the DC-3, and then later to the 737 and all the other great aircraft built here in Seattle, that we started to democratize the frontier of aviation, that it became something that millions of people could do every day. Computing is the same way. The first computers filled a room. They cost millions of dollars in today's money, and if you thought about it, they were really put to only the questions that were being asked by the governments. But today, in your cell phone, in your pocket, you have more computing power than the Apollo 11 astronauts had on the surface of the moon. Technology has a way of being democratized, and we're seeing that right now with the space frontier. But still, with all that, we get a chance to go. We see that it's coming. Why should we care? Why does it matter? Some people would tell you it's for the spin-off technologies, not the Velcro and the Tang and the memory foam mattresses, but for the mammograms, the weather forecasts, the MRIs, and the GPS technology, things that are changing our life every day for the better. But really, those are fringe benefits. They are things that come out of tackling some really hard questions, and there are lots of other really hard questions we could be tackling. I look up at the International Space Station, and if you go up on a summer night, you can see it overhead about once every 90 minutes when it's in our area of the world. The I in ISS is international. Part of the reason we're up there is because we can achieve things with nation partners from all over the world that we can't do on the ground, and we're doing some amazing things on that frontier. There's also science and technology, because when you're in a place where there is no up and down, where you're floating free, hot air doesn't rise. And the candles that you've drawn on your birthday cakes ever since you were a kid, they don't look like that. Instead, you get this cool ball of blue flame. And that's not only beautiful, it's actually really interesting, because the fundamental physics behind combustion, when we study it in that environment, is allowing us to build more efficient engines, cleaner burning fuels. And when you're in a place where hot air doesn't rise, heavy things also don't sink. So now you can make alloys that are not possible in any furnace on Earth. You can grow protein crystals that help us to develop drugs that are 2 to 5 to 10 times larger than anything's possible in a laboratory here in Seattle. You can do things that are just not possible here on the ground. If we take the long view, some people will tell you that one of the best reasons to go to space is that it's actually not empty. Space is full, and it's full of all the things that we find so scarce here on the Earth. It's full of land. It's full of energy. It's full of minerals and water. It's full of things that give us hope, not only for some future colony, somewhere way out there on the final frontier, but for ways of making our own planet today a better place. For me, the reason I have spent my life working on space is both more simple and more difficult than I can explain. It's really about the joy. It's because for me, when I see boot prints in the lunar dust, or rover tracks on the surface of Mars, or when I lay out on a summer night with my kids and watch a meteor shower, there's something deep within me that's resonating, that says, we are all star stuff. That this infinite universe that's around us is part of what makes us human. So for me, this opening of the frontier, this third age of exploration where we're all getting a chance to go, it's really interesting. When it's not just Neil and Buzz's footprints on the surface of the moon, but footprints of all nations. When it's not just scientists and engineers that experience firsthand how thin and fragile our atmosphere is, but our world leaders and our business leaders. And when it's not just selecting for the right stuff, but enabling all that other stuff that makes us so very human, I think that the possibilities are literally endless. I hope to see you out there. Thank you.